Good evening and welcome to Democracy News Live. Today we are back on our show. Today we are debating an issue which is very important for us. Is the Industrial Relations Code Bill 2019. And that is what we are discussing today. But I want to remind our viewers one thing which is very important. The status of workers globally. Corporate interests are constantly put up ahead of the interest of the working class. So let's say 60% of the countries, excluding whole categories of workers, do not have proper labor laws. 84 countries exclude workers from the labor laws. Over three-quarters of countries deny some of the workers their right to strike. Over three-quarters of countries deny workers collective bargaining. Out of the 139 countries surveyed, 50 deny or constrain free speech and freedom of assembly. Now, the situation is that we've all heard stories, lockouts, strikes, but we've never really hear much about how a balanced, proper system works and functions. And any country that has a good, solid system in place, its industry does well, the companies do well, they're healthy, and the labor has enough provisions for safety, earnings of their family, quality of life. There are many which don't. Many, and I've heard this many a time, that why don't we make India into a China kind of system where, our workers will be working hard. But obviously China kind of system also means that you'll be underpaying your labor. The quality of existence of these workers are going to be really bad. What we saw with this whole, what we call quote unquote migrant crisis, workers are single workers sitting in cities because they don't make enough to bring their families over, which means they're sitting far away from their families. What kind of a system are we putting in place? What kind of a country are we building? And that's one of the challenges we're going to be talking about today. I'll get into the details now. There are four major contentious points that we need to, ponder over. And first of all is the national tribunals. When they rule, can the government overrule? Second one, contract periods. Now there's going to be, hire and fire possible because this whole contract periods are going to be decided by the companies. The lockout's going to be banned without a 14-day notice, which means, all of a sudden something happens and the workers want to go on strike. That's not going to be allowed. And then finally, the code requires the employer of establishment with at least 100 workers to obtain permission from the appropriate government prior to retrenchment of a worker. Now, it's a highly complex bill. I know we've taken a long journey from where we were a few years ago. We are making our journey towards this new act, which is right now only a bill. It's not been right now cleared by the houses. It's not become a notification, not been notified. So it's still a bill, and we are discussing the merits and the demerits of the bill and what it stands at. I'll be joined by two guests. One of them, Mr. Agarwal. He was former Secretary of Labor with the Government of India, and also will be joining us is a lawyer, Charu. Charu is a Supreme Court lawyer. She's already on the line with us, and she's also going to be, weighing in on how do we look at this present situation, what's going to happen. Let me bring in Mr. Agarwal first. Mr. Agarwal, we had a discussion a couple of years ago, and we were talking about the new labor law and what it means and how it kind of pans out. Explain to me this new transition from the old labor law and the new bill, obviously, which will become law later once we implement it.
Yeah, you see, most of our labor laws are archaic. These were created way back in 1930s, 40s, and once we gained independence in 50s, and thereafter during the emergency and thereafter. These laws were created primarily to look after the welfare of the workers, to ensure that they get basically three kinds of security. One is wage security. That means everybody has to be paid minimum in case of a medical emergency, or in case of an accident, or in case of old age. They must be protected, their families must be protected, and that's why we have created two big institutions called ESIC to take care of the health issues, and second is EPFO to take care of their old age, pension, and things like that. And third was, which is very important and which is very contentious, is the job security.
Mm,
Initially, because the jobs were very few, India did not have many industrial establishment. Not only industrial establishment, India did not have many even other establishment in commerce, industries, and in service sector as well. Under these circumstances, it was very necessary to protect each and every job in the country. And that's why we created, at that point of time, the country created laws which were basically meant to protect jobs. However,
right.
in due course of time, things have changed dramatically. Number one, the way we produce and we distribute and sell product, it has undergone a huge change. Today, everything is being done at different level. Some value addition takes place in England, some value addition takes place in America, some in Taiwan, China, Korea, and maybe something in India. And thereafter, it is being sold. Now, to say that every law of that particular country has to be implemented, it becomes very difficult. Number one. Number two, because of the globalized economy, now it depends what kind of orders an industrialist or an entrepreneur get. Maybe today he is getting an order of 1 million shirts. Tomorrow that kind of order may not be there. So he cannot have permanent workers, because in that case, after that work order is executed, he will not have work for the workers, and ultimately that enterprise will become sick. Under these circumstances, we have to change and we have to tweak our laws, and that's why government of India thought it fit to replace our central labor laws, which are about 44 in number, to replace these 44 labor laws by 4 labor codes, and one of the labor code is on industrial relation. Now, let me come, or whenever you want me to come on the contingent issue, I can do that.
Absolutely. Let me bring in Charu Wali Khanna. She's a former member of the National Commission of Women as well, and let Charu weigh in. She's dealt with a lot of labor laws in the past, and has fought a number of cases around it. Charu, when you look at this new bill, which is not yet an act yet, what do you see that stands out for you, and what do you see in our old laws? What were the challenges as you dealt in courts with these issues?
See, I think it's a very good attempt, and still, but a lot of work needs to go into it. I mean, it's creditable that around 40 plus laws, central government laws, are being amalgamated into this. But I still feel that it's got a terribly androcentric approach because I'm a former member of the Women's Commission and a women's rights activist. The word woman has been just mentioned once, and that also for the there's some the central committee, the conciliation officers, if they are two, one has to be a woman, which I think is not a very good way to look at it, because we need to increase the participation of women in the labor force. And the more women that you will have, India will have in the labor force, the faster it will be able to develop. And I guess that is the whole purpose. They wanted, the government wants more investment to come, and there were a plethora of laws which it was not possible for any foreign investor to follow so many rules and regulation, and with so many inspectors, down their throat. So they thought that they'd amalgamate it into one law, but somehow there's no social security for women. They haven't spoken about protection and welfare for women. So I still feel that it's got a very androcentric approach. Now, one of the issues that they're talking about is the wages. That's the first point I think that's been flagged in the court and in the discussions of the committee, is that for unjustifiable reasons, if the company or the factory or the organization has to close down, they will not have to pay wages. But now I think we have contradicted ourselves in the times of COVID, because the first order that the Home Ministry said was that irrespective of if your company or factory or workplace has been locked down, you have to give a payment of wages to your workers. And then the factory owners went to the Supreme Court, and and I don't know at this point has the order been withdrawn or not. So we are
Yeah.
talking when we're trying to do the international perspective, and I think your earlier speaker was talking about, we're trying to amalgamate the international scene and what is happening overseas. But then you have to see that overseas, what happens is that you can hire and fire, but then there's an unemployment benefit, which the state has a liability. Here, the state has no liability. If you see in the times of COVID, in a lot of developed nations, people have been furloughed. Furloughed means like, they've got wages
They've been
that they've
given
not
money.
been
They've been given
thrown
money.
out, but no wages are being given. But who's giving the wages? The state. The
The
state
state.
is giving an
Absolutely.
unemployment
It's
benefit
a
to
social.
everyone.
Yeah.
The federal, like in the USA, the federal is giving, federal government and even the state government. So they have divided the portions and whatever. And it's not like a dole, like, we give you a flat amount. People
It's a
who've been
UI.
earning
It's an
high
unemployment
wages,
insurance.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So people who've been earning high wages, they are, they have to file the return, they have to give some information and then they check up with the employer. So a percentage of the wage. So it's not like everybody is getting equal. You're getting according to your capacity and the work you've been doing and the money you've been earning. Now here, if you're going to say that, just get rid of everybody, at 24-hour notice, then what is the state? That's okay. That's how it is done overseas. But there, the state has a liability and they support the person. Now, what if a woman is working and the company closes down and they throw her out and she's expecting? I mean, what is the sensitivity of the state? So, I think it's important to add state liability in this because it's understandable. Then they've spoken about the 14 days notice and kind upskilling. There's nothing about upskilling of women in the labor force because we know that
Sure.
the
Sure.
labor force, more women in the informal labor force, and they're getting no facilities. If
Sure.
you've
No,
seen the
absolutely.
latest news, which is
Charu, just for like, kind of rounding off your points,
absolutely
one of the very important issues, and I've lived in multiple countries and I've worked in multiple
yes,
countries. If the systems are not in place, if the government does not recognize its taxpayers early on and does not value them, then they're not going to value the government as well. So, for example, let's say we as a somebody who pays a high amount of tax, he or she is able to take no money back for education of their children. The health benefits are not there, uh, and they see no return. And in a time like this, when there is unemployment, because a lot of people are not going to get wages, that's the reality of things, and whatever the court order, the government MHA order would have been, if companies don't have money in their account, they're not going to pay the salaries. As simple as that. And there are many MSMEs who are like that. And if the government doesn't back it, then there is no way around it. But anywhere else in the world, any country which is half decent, have a system called the unemployment insurance. You file, say, I didn't get my salary, you get an unemployment insurance for 6 months. And in this case, in COVID, the federal governments, for example, let's look at Canada. They went out and said, we will pay your rent if you are a worker. If you worked certain number of hours, we will come out and do that. And so, and pregnant women, single moms, these categories are heavily protected. So I think there is responsibility on the side of the state, and you very, very rightly
right.
point that out. Let me bring in Mr. Agarwal because I know he speaks on both sides of the story, and he was the former labor secretary, and I know he certainly feels very strongly about why we needed change. But Mr. Agarwal, if you can kind of round off your perspective from the labor's point of view. I know the industry suffers tremendously with this 43 laws and a highly corrupt system. I know a couple who runs a hospital, and they were telling me they're the only ones who follow the law, and they're the only ones who have to pay because all the others who aren't following the law aren't having to pay all the workers and the PF and everything, and then they still pay the inspector off, and they're sorted. But they're, in spite of having registered themselves, they still have to pay. They run a hospital out of UP in a small district in Bijnor. So I think those are all challenge areas. So from your perspective, how well is the labor protected? I know the industries are going to be happier with this law.
Okay. Let me first take up the issues of women. As ma'am said, that nothing much has been done for the women. Thereafter, the COVID, which is an unprecedented kind of a situation. And third, about these four contentious issues and the labor perspective. Regarding women, you see, whether they are in private sector, public sector, formal sector, or informal, we have created new law where they are now beneficiary of extended maternity benefit. That means instead of 16 weeks leave, today they are entitled to get 26 weeks of paid leave. Whether in private sector, public sector, it doesn't matter. Secondly, we had mentioned in that act that they would be encouraged to work from home also. Looking into their situation and they have to look after their families and a whole lot of other things, he said it will be a good idea to allow them to work from home at least for once a week or maybe 3 days or 4 days in a month or something like that. So that was one. And not only that, what we have said that in case of wages, they will be treated at equal level. And when we talk about these labor codes, we do not make any distinction between a male worker and a female worker. So all benefits are applicable to the women workers also, whether it is ESIC or EPFO or any other thing. So that is now coming to the COVID, because it is an unprecedented situation. Whole lot of people are out of job, and it is not that entrepreneurs or the industrialists or the employers are happy to put them off work because they are not getting any input, they are not getting any revenue. So it is very difficult for them to continue with their operation. So under these circumstances, they all these workers had to be supported, whether in informal sector or informal sector, had to be supported by the government. And I'm on record. The government has to find out ways and means of supporting these workers. Like in England and many other European countries, once you are unemployed because of some natural calamity like this, almost 80%, 75%, 70% wages are paid by the government. And they look into your income tax returns, and on the basis of income tax return, that is
Sure.
being done.
You think
Surely, we
India
should
can
have
do
on the
it?
I
Can
want
yes,
India
why
do it?
not? The only thing is we got to create some kind of a fund. We had to find out ways and means of doing this, and there has to be a very very strong will, because it means huge amount of expenditure on the part of the government, but it is the responsibility of the government. So that is.
All right. All right.
Secondly,
Charu, you want to weigh in on this?
I
Sorry,
want
sir.
to,
I'll get Charu come in
I
on
just,
this and then we'll come back.
sorry, my mistake. Sorry for interrupting. I think you very rightly said that government has to support them, and this times of COVID is a test for the bill. They're talking about wages not to be paid for unjustifiable reasons or natural disaster, and that struck. Now, what are you doing? Are you going back on what you said? So, I mean, this is the true test because these times anything can happen. And a similar situation can happen. A company may close down, there may be a natural disaster, or maybe that product becomes redundant. You know, like everyone is,
And
all
many
the
are.
factories, there's no sales.
And
There are no sales
and
of
there are
maybe
many
vehicles or
products.
anything.
There
Yeah.
are many
So
products which are
you have
redundant. Restaurants, cinema halls.
absolutely.
So who is going to support them? And to say that it's going to take a lot of money, I think then we need to get our priorities right because there are a lot of money is spent in a lot of places, but you need to just ensure that the money goes in the right manner. Don't make such long lines. When there was this COVID happened and they had this e-rations, I had so many people ringing me up. They're not getting food. They're standing in the line. Well, why are we making everything become so procedural and so much red tape that it encourages corruption? The idea of amalgamating 40 plus laws was that you want to have a single act, you want to have some separate tribunals, you want to simplify the procedures. So, if you want to simplify the procedures, genuinely simplify it and support people. After
Ma'am,
all, they are
can I
yours.
intervene?
It's don't have a crisis and then suddenly, you have to keep spending money and doing things. Don't ever let that crisis situation happen. and
No, I
support the
agree.
people. It is the government's liability, and like the labor commissioner said, that it is, they cannot escape it.
He's,
After all,
yeah,
we're trying to imagine
he's
that
the
we're going
former
to be
labor
the biggest
secretary and not the
economy.
commissioner. He
Sorry,
was,
See,
my
so let
mistake.
me
We
intervene
were
at
former
this
labor
point.
sector. After
But
all,
all
our
these
ambition is
labor,
to be number two or number one of the world's economy. Then let's start behaving like that. Let's start thinking like that. Because if we start thinking like that, we'll start behaving like that, and we'll deliver in that way.
we
okay.
must
So
protect
as
our workers in
oh,
every way and fashion. We must create a phenomenal structure, because until we don't have that phenomenal structure, I don't think we will enjoy the respect the world deserves and gives to its workers. A very interesting thing. So I'm just going to say one thing and then I'm going to come back to you. A US diplomat told me, he said, Rohit, whatever you may do in North America, if you work 8 hours a day, you have enough money, whatever you may do, irrespective of the job. You have a home, you can go on a holiday, you can drive a car. He says, the economy gives back to you. Whether in its own head, I don't know how much it values that work, but it says this person is putting in that number of hours. We'll give him decent quality of life. Recognizing that idea and then saying distribution of wealth will happen, more, it cannot be entirely egalitarian, and we all recognize that we work in a capitalistic system, but it'll be closer to the idea of trying to find what does this person need to survive, what does the family need to survive and survive well, and not just food in your mouth and going to a hospital and sending the kids to a school which is half working really, and a health system which doesn't function at all. So sorry, sir, I interrupted you there. Let me come back to you, Mr. Agarwal. Please weigh in
yeah,
on your point
what
too.
I was saying, that all these labor laws and now these labor codes are meant primarily for workers in the formal sector, and most of our workers are in informal sector. So we got to create again new mechanism to ensure that all these workers in the informal sector are also protected in terms of wage security, in terms of social security, and to a large extent in terms of job security. Now, you are saying whether government can find money or not. I am entirely agree with you. Whatever has to be done, that has to be done to find out ways and means of providing financial assistance to all these workers. You don't have to ask them to come on a queue to get some kind of a ration. You just put money in their account and then they'll be able to go to the market and find out whatever they want. And that's a very decent way of doing things. So that is one part. Now coming to this health services and the educational services for children. Again, we got to create new mechanism so that we develop world class education institution. We talk about education for all. We talk whole lot of things, but the quality of education in this country is appalling. We do not add anything to the existing pool of knowledge. We do not create any new knowledge. What is being done, it is nothing but a rote learning. So the focus is on acquisition of knowledge and not on application of knowledge, and that has to be set right. And it has to be done at every level, whether it's a private school or a government school or assisted school. Similarly, in health, you go to the any government dispensary, and as Mr. Gandhi was saying, it is extremely difficult to get any meaningful and any substantial or optimal health services from any government institution. So it is appalling again. So we have to set it right. And it's not a rocket science, by the way. It requires a little bit of will. You got to have the right kind of people who are going to manage these systems. And once you do that, things will be better. As you were saying, Mr. Gandhi, about the ESIC. Yes, I know. I've been a part of that system. Most of these ESI hospitals, clinics are again non-functional, suboptimal. And
Ah,
it's again not very
sometimes no
difficult to set
doctors
this right.
even.
You got to have
They
good
aren't.
structure, number one. And
They
you
aren't.
got to have good set of
Independent
people
audit
who
system, a good,
absolutely.
solid, independent audit system,
And
a
good set of
system that
people who
functions.
are running these organizations.
100%.
So once you
100%.
do that, I'm quite sure that we can do it. It's not very difficult, by the way. The only
When
thing
people
is it
voted more,
requires
when
huge.
people voted Prime Minister Modi in, that is what they were expecting, and that is why he got voted in. Let's be honest about that. When people looked at Narendra Modi, they said, "Is this the man? Is he going to be able to deliver?" And I think that's what they looked at. We have an entirely different world today, and we're not going to get into the other aspects of it. But I think that is what people were looking for when they voted Narendra Modi in. Charu, closing thoughts. We're
Yeah,
going
I
to
just
come
wanted
to
to,
an
sorry, I know I won't take time. I just wanted to add to what Mr. Agarwal said. He rightly said that about this education. We need upskilling, like especially in rural area. There's such a large, elderly care. This is such a big employment sector, physiotherapy, elderly care, but there are no people. They're not trained. So you're training your students and you're not giving them the skills which the market requires. So there's some kind of mismatch in our education system, and definitely we need a
not
skill
just rural,
upgradation.
Charu, not just rural, everywhere. I do not even meet a decent engineer coming from top institutes. I spoke to an engineer this morning. She was looking for a job in human resources. I don't want to name her, but the skill set of engineering was pathetic. She came from a school which is decent enough. But if you're engineering schools, and I've met dozens of engineers over this last 1 year who've come out and I said, "What do you know in engineering?" I said, "Actually, nothing. Only 20% of the syllabus was taught to us by school. The rest they said, learn it on your own." And my parents were paying 5 lakhs a month to go to this engineering school because of that I have a degree. And all I needed is actually a job with anything to do with management or sales. I'm like, why did you do engineering? It doesn't make
Thank
sense,
you.
right? So I think there is something very, very wrong in the system, and we need to really, really fix it.
We
Closing
need to
thoughts,
fix
Charu, and then
overall.
closing thoughts from Mr. Agarwal. Closing
No,
thoughts,
I
Charu.
definitely think like so. I think the topic was this bill, and I think this is the right time we're having the discussion because COVID has shown that what are the pitfalls of the bill and what should be the state responsibility. So I think maybe the state needs to lead. They need to have a committee, another round of consultation, and they need to rethink the role of the state when such a in the eventuality of such something like this happening and the wages not being paid to the worker. That's all.
Great, thank you. Closing thoughts, Mr. Agarwal.
This labor sector is a very important sector, and especially when we are talking about being Atmanirbhar. When we talk about Atmanirbhar, that means we have to have large numbers, millions and millions of enterprises. These enterprises will be set up and thereafter will be done successfully only when our labor laws are transparent, efficient, and simple. Somehow, in the process, we have created a set of rules and regulation and laws which are extremely complex. We must rely on the workers and we must rely on the employer rather than depending
Absolutely.
on a whole lot of enforcement agencies,
Inspectors.
that is inspectors. And then
Right. So,
secondly, as you,
sorry,
and
sir. Sorry, go
second,
for it.
we got to encourage contract act to a very, very large extent because now the value chain, in the value chain, the values are getting added at various places. So people have to be there on contract basis. The only thing is we have to ensure when the contract ends, the person is paid decently so that when he is out of job, he can survive, he can look after his family. So we must have a good severance package. And once people know that he is going to join an organization on contract basis,
Oh, it could
that
be
will
she
earn
also.
good money.
He or she.
So I'm
All
sure
He
that
needs you. He needs you in
COVID has
India.
given a huge opportunity to
all
the
right,
government
good. Uh,
to
all
set
right.
its act
No,
right.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I understand, Mr. Agarwal. So great. So I think we need to really, really look at this seriously. The whole crisis that we saw through, firing of labor, people not being able to pay salaries, small MSMEs weren't being able to pay salaries, and a lot of the workers in the unorganized sector having to go back home, walking back with their families. The videos that we saw were heart wrenching, literally. And I think it brought back to life the understanding that the workers have to be handled well. These are real human beings. They're not just hands and bodies which will do your work and get your work done. We have to respect the people we have. We have to respect the nation we have. You're not going to be able to build a great nation when you treat such a large part of your population so poorly. And then the rest of the population enjoys amazing resources, you know, rides the best planes, ride the best cars, lives in beautiful homes, while the workers that actually put in the work don't get anything at all. And so I think that balance has to be struck, and that has to come clearly out in the laws and then its implementation. And that's what it's going to take. Thank you very much, Charu Ali Khanna, for joining me for the show today. Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. Very kindly, you guys agreed. And I think it's an important one. While everybody wants to talk about only COVID or the China border dispute, I think we have to look beyond. And Democracy News Live will continue to bringing you these stories, which are very, very important for the nation. And we're not going to let this go by. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.